It was the day that Veronica had dreamed of her entire life. Her wedding to Giorgio, her partner, the man who had stolen her heart years before, had finally arrived. Veronica stood in the antechamber of the church, her eyes filled with conflicting emotions, joy, excitement, but also a hint of anxiety. Her wedding dress sparkled under the soft light, the lace and silk details catching every ray of light, and her heart was pounding. But there was one thing that made her even more nervous. Bruto, her dog, her inseparable companion in life. Bruto had always been by her side from her childhood until this moment, in every significant step of her life. And now, on her wedding day, the thought of leaving him behind for the ceremony troubled her more than she wanted to admit. But what would happen if something went wrong? Her heart tightened at the thought that Bruto might feel alone as she walked towards Giorgio. But she never imagined that what was about to happen would test her love for him like never before. When she finally reached the altar, ready to say, "I do," something completely unexpected happened. Bruto, her loyal German shepherd, suddenly blocked her way, standing firm in front of her. His tail wasn't wagging as usual, his amber eyes weren't filled with joy. Instead, the dog stared at her with such intensity that it made Veronica's blood run cold. The guests fell silent. A murmur passed through the church as everyone wondered what was going on. Veronica, initially surprised, thought that Bruto was just agitated by the confusion around him. But when the dog didn't move an inch, she realized that there was something much more serious behind this reaction. "Bruto, let's go," Veronica said, her voice trembling, trying to move him with a wave of her hand. But the dog didn't budge. He wasn't barking. He wasn't growling. But his presence there, in front of her, was more powerful than any sound. Bruto's eyes were fixed on her, full of an intensity she couldn't understand. Bruto kept staring at her without breaking his gaze, almost as if he was trying to communicate something much deeper. His paws trembled. His breathing was shallow. Veronica knelt beside him, trying to gently pet him, hoping to calm his agitation. "What's wrong, Bruto?" she murmured, her voice breaking. But Bruto didn't move. It was as if his body was trying to tell her something that words couldn't explain. Meanwhile, the tension increased among the guests, who began exchanging worried glances. Veronica's father, who was watching the scene, approached with an unreadable expression. "Veronica, we need to go," he said, trying to move Bruto out of the way. But Veronica's voice grew louder, more determined. "No, Dad, I can't leave him," she replied, almost pleading. Her mind was in turmoil. She couldn't understand what was happening, but she knew that this moment would be crucial. Bruto, the dog who had always protected her, who had been with her through her toughest times, now seemed to be in danger. Veronica felt a tightness in her chest. She knelt next to him, wrapping her arms around him, and as she petted him, her heart started to race, as if she was trying to grasp something slipping away from her. After what seemed like an eternity, Veronica slowly stood up, making a decision. She couldn't ignore what was happening. "Let's go to the vet," she said firmly, looking at Giorgio. It was a difficult moment, but she had to face it. Giorgio didn't hesitate for a second. "All right, let's go right away. Don't worry about anything, Veronica. Bruto comes first," he replied, trying to reassure her. His voice was calm, but Veronica could see the unease in his eyes. The tension between them was palpable, but they both knew that this situation was more important than anything else. Bruto, nestled in Veronica's arms, seemed almost resigned, as if he knew he had to face something bigger than himself. The car sped toward the veterinary clinic with a speed no one could have imagined, while Veronica's heart beat in unison with her dog's. Her hands trembled as she stroked Bruto's snout, trying to comfort him, but she, too, could feel the fear rising within her. When they arrived at the veterinary clinic, Dr. Rossi, the vet who had been taking care of Bruto since he was a puppy, was already waiting for them. Without wasting any time, he immediately led them to the exam room. The atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with worry. Veronica sat next to Bruto as the vet began examining him carefully. The minutes felt like hours. Veronica and Giorgio didn't speak. Both focused on Bruto, on his labored breathing and his trembling pause. Veronica's heart slowly shattered. She had always thought that this day would be the happiest of her life, but now everything felt so distant, blurry. Dr. Rossi lifted his gaze after a while, and his words struck Veronica's heart like a blow. Bruto has heart failure. The stress of the wedding has worsened his condition. With medication, he might feel better, but unfortunately, his life won't last long. We're talking about months, not years. The vet's words pierced Veronica's heart like a poisoned arrow. She couldn't respond, couldn't fully comprehend the gravity of the situation. Only tears silently streamed down her cheeks. "He's suffering. I can't live without him. I can't lose him," she whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Rossi tried to comfort her. "Bruto has lived a life full of love. Now his job is to live as peacefully as possible. He's a fighter, just like you." As Dr. Rossi explained the treatment plan for Bruto, Veronica and Giorgio were completely overwhelmed by sadness. The reality they were facing seemed so far from what they had imagined for their special day. But at that moment, something happened that no one could have predicted. The door of the clinic suddenly opened, and Veronica's father entered, followed by her mother and Sophia, her maid of honor. They approached Veronica with a compassionate look. "We thought you might need some support," said her father in a calm voice. Sophia, holding her phone, stepped forward. "The guests understand, but maybe we don't need to cancel the wedding. We can do it here if you want." Veronica looked at Giorgio, searching his eyes for an answer. Giorgio smiled gently at her. "It's not the wedding we planned, but maybe it's the right one. What matters is that we're together, with Bruto." Veronica nodded, and through her tears she replied, "Let's do it." In less than an hour, the veterinary clinic was transformed into an impromptu wedding hall. The priest prepared to officiate the ceremony, while Sophia helped Veronica adjust her dress, and Giorgio fixed his slightly wrinkled tie. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. The priest smiled, looking at Bruto lying at their feet, and began the ceremony. When he finally pronounced the words that declared them husband and wife, Bruto lifted his head, wagging his tail weakly as if he understood the significance of the moment. The ceremony was brief but deeply emotional. Veronica and Giorgio exchanged vows, and when the priest declared them husband and wife, Bruto let out a small, satisfied bark. Laughter and tears from the guests filled the room. It wasn't the wedding they had imagined, but for Veronica and Giorgio, it was perfect. Their love was there, together with Bruto, who had made that day unforgettable. In the months that followed, life for Veronica and Giorgio was a delicate balance of joy and sorrow. The treatments for Bruto had shown results, but they knew that their dog's time was limited. They took care of him every day, trying to give him as much peace as possible. Every walk in the park was an opportunity to remember the good times they had shared, to enjoy every moment spent with their beloved companion. But they couldn't ignore the fact that Bruto's days were numbered. When the illness began to manifest with greater intensity, Veronica and Giorgio adapted to the change. They reorganized their lives around Bruto, making every moment special, every stroke an act of love. One winter evening, while Bruto lay beside them, Veronica stroked his fur and smiled, recalling all the moments they had shared. "You've been my best friend, Bruto. The best of all," she whispered, her eyes filled with affection and gratitude. Time passed, and day by day Bruto grew weaker. Veronica and Giorgio had seen him grow, age, and face life's difficulties with them. But now, Bruto's days were numbered. He woke up every morning with difficulty, only getting up to stay close to his owners, as if he knew that those few moments of joy were what really mattered. His eyes were now dimmer, but they never stopped looking at Veronica with the same unconditional love as before. It was one winter evening when, after a long day spent together in the warmth of the house, Bruto seemed ready to say goodbye. The warm light from the lamps created a soft tone in the room, while the smell of pine from the Christmas tree mixed with the cold air entering through the windows. Veronica sat next to him, gently stroking his fur. She couldn't hold back the tears, but she knew Bruto wouldn't want to see her sad. So, with a forced smile, she whispered to him, "You've been my best friend, Bruto. I will never forget you. Thank you for always being with me." Giorgio entered the room with 2 cups of hot chocolate and, seeing the scene, knelt beside Veronica. He embraced his wife and whispered, trying to comfort her, "We knew, my love. We knew. But never forget that Bruto taught us what unconditional love means." Veronica nodded, but the pain she felt in her heart was immense. Bruto had loved without reservations, without asking for anything in return. And now, when it seemed like everything was falling apart, Veronica felt the weight of her loss. But at the same time, there was a sense of gratitude. Bruto had lived a life full of affection and happiness, and he had given Veronica and Giorgio a love that could never be replaced. That evening, as the Christmas tree shimmered with warm lights and the sound of a Christmas song filled the house, Bruto fell asleep for the last time. In his stillness, it seemed as if he was finally finding peace. Veronica and Giorgio stayed by his side without saying a word, but both knowing that this was the end of an important phase of their lives. After Bruto's death, Veronica and Giorgio's house suddenly seemed empty, as if a piece of them had been taken away. It wasn't just his physical presence that was missed, but also his energy, his happy wagging tail, his gaze that spoke everything without needing words. Veronica found comfort in the memories. Every corner of the house seemed to tell a story. The park where Bruto had run happily, the sofa where he had slept, his bed in the garden. Everything reminded her of how special he had been. And every time she looked at a photo of him, her heart would fill with a love she would never stop feeling for her friend. Days passed, and unfortunately, the sadness seemed reluctant to leave their hearts. But with time, life continued to present new challenges and new opportunities, and Veronica and Giorgio learned to live with the emptiness that Bruto had left behind. One afternoon, while Veronica was flipping through old photographs, she stopped on one taken the day of their wedding. It was a picture of them with the priest, exchanging their vows. But there was one thing that struck her particularly. They weren't looking into each other's eyes, as one would expect in a wedding. No, their eyes were fixed on Bruto, who was lying between them, his head resting on their laps, as if he was watching over them. "Do you think he knew?" Veronica asked Giorgio, her voice filled with melancholy. Giorgio looked at the photo, and after a moment of reflection, nodded. Yes, he knew perfectly. In that moment, Veronica felt that Bruto had understood something they hadn't yet fully grasped. That love has no end, that even though people and animals may leave, the love we give and receive stays forever in the heart. Months after Bruto's death, Veronica and Giorgio decided to return to the shelter where they had found their dog many years before. There, where everything had started, they would find a new companion, someone with whom they could share the love that Bruto had left in their hearts. It was a rainy day, the sky was gray, and the sound of the drops hitting the windows gave a sense of calm. When they arrived at the shelter, they found several dogs waiting for a family to love them. Every gaze, every wagging tail, spoke of a still-living hope, of a desire to be loved. At the end of the hall, an elderly dog caught Veronica's attention. It was a golden retriever named Loki. He was a medium-sized dog, with a gray muzzle and eyes full of a wisdom that Veronica recognized immediately. There were no words at that moment, just a deep, silent look between Veronica and the dog. That gaze, like an invisible thread, bound them together, as if Loki had always been part of their lives. Veronica knelt down and gently stroked Loki's head. Tears ran down her face as she looked into the dog's eyes. "It's him," she whispered. "He's the one." Giorgio knelt beside her, smiling gently. "Welcome to the family, Loki." he said, petting him behind the ears. From that day, Loki became part of the family. Every day was a new beginning, and, despite the pain of losing Bruto, Loki's presence brought a new light into their home. They took care of him as they had done with Bruto, and together they rediscovered the importance of living unconditional love, just as Bruto had done with them. Every year, on their anniversary, Veronica and Giorgio returned to the shelter to visit the elderly dogs, those who had been waiting too long for a family. It was their way of honoring Bruto's memory, of showing that the love they had received from him would never fade. They brought food, toys, and, above all, time. Every dog they met in the shelter seemed to need a little of that love they had received from Bruto, and every time they looked at Loki they realized that, even though Bruto was no longer physically present, his spirit was still there, in their hearts, in every gesture they made to help other animals. The love that Bruto had given to Veronica and Giorgio was something that would never fade. Even though life had taken a different direction, even though time couldn't be stopped, Bruto's legacy continued to live on. Every new friend they welcomed into their lives was a way to celebrate that lesson of pure love that Bruto had left them. Thank you for listening to this story. What do you think? Write it in the comments, and if you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. See you soon with a new story.